Hey everyone, just wanted to come out and release a video about the most recent announcement earlier this week about the changes in the ban list and kind of go over what my thoughts are for that and how they are affecting our CEDH community. This isn't scripted. I've got some notes over here, but so this might get a little bit rambly at times, but I felt this was important to have a conversation about this. Also, it's pretty windy outside, so if you hear some whooshes or whatever in the microphone, that's what that is. A little bit of a fallout from the hurricane that had happened earlier this week, so we're hearing a little bit of that up here. So forgive that if that comes through in the mic. So what are we going to cover in this video? I wanted to cover just a really quick card discussion. Yeah, I don't want to go too deep on that. A lot of people have released really good content about their thoughts, and I agree with just about all of them. I'll link a couple of resources in the descriptions below about my thoughts on a lot of these things. I'm going to talk about decks and meta considerations, kind of what are the fallout of that, what I think it will end up being. Obviously, we don't know what it's going to be, but we can make some educated guesses. The emotions around all of this. It's been a very emotional week for worse. You know, I'm not going to say for better or for worse, but definitely for worse. A lot of bad stuff happened in this community this week, and it makes me very sad and disheartened to see how a lot of us reacted. And where do we go from here? There's a lot of decisions that the CEDH community is trying to make. Some of them I feel are misguided. The other ones I feel that are good. And we'll kind of cover those, what the implications of those might be, and so on. And that's probably going to be the majority of the video. What am I not going to cover in this video? I'm not going to cover the RC's handling of the situation, the CAG involvement, what they could have done better, what they could have done worse, what their actions should have been or shouldn't have been. I'm not going to cover any of that here. You can find a lot of other videos that go into that in great detail. You can draw any conclusions based on that. Any of the financial aspects or fallout from those financial aspects. I'm not a finance person. I have a substantial collection, but I don't look at these things from a financial side of things. I've been collecting for a very long time, and I'm not going to get into what the RC or CAG's decision meant from a financial side. I'm also not going to get into any sort of conspiracy theories or tinfoil hat stuff. Someone was colluding with somebody else, or sell-offs, or was WotC trying to dump product or anything like that. That's not what this video is about. Once again, you can look at other videos, and like I said, I will put links to a couple of other notable videos I think that are really good watch that I think you should check out. So let's just start off with what my thoughts are on the whole thing. So what I'd like to ask you is, first and foremost, I will put out some points, and you might disagree with some of them, and that's perfectly fine. But I just ask that you give me time to fully explain myself. Give me a little bit of patience, a little bit of grace. And throughout this, I ask that, if you have something that is a differing opinion or something like that, or you have a very good faith argument or rebuttal to this, I highly encourage you to comment below. I really want to hear what your thoughts on this. We are a community. We are in this together. And I want you to let your voice be heard. These good faith arguments, as you post them, I want to maybe make a short and respond to you, or I'll respond to you in the comments. I really want to hear what you all have to say. I will entertain all good faith arguments. Any bad faith arguments, insults, harassment, anything like that, it's not going to be tolerated. So what are my thoughts? So first and foremost, let me just come out right now and say, I don't want any of these cards to be banned. I don't like that a lot of these cards are banned. I'm very unhappy with it. Earlier this week, I was very emotional about it. I was pretty angry when I heard about it. I wanted to set that stance right there from my personal feelings on the subject, that I didn't want them to go. I was really sad, surprised, and upset that these cards were suddenly banned from us. I play Commander and CEDH to play with broken cards, and these cards are broken, and we're going to get into why they're so broken here in a second, but we cannot deny that these are broken. But that's why I play this format. I didn't come to play balanced, even, Magic. I play that in any of the other formats. They all regulate for that kind of stuff. Commander specifically doesn't regulate for power levels. They know that it's a broken format, and they feel that it's better when you don't play it as if it's broken. But CDH, our version of fun is playing when it's broken. And I'm really sad that some of these cards are gone. And like I said, one of the reasons I play CDH is to play with broken cards. So with all that said, let's go ahead and break down the actual card discussions here. So 4 cards were banned in the most recent announcement. That was Dockside Extortionist, Nadu Winged Wisdom, Mana Crypt, and Jeweled Lotus. Let's start with Dockside. So I already told you that I didn't want the cards to be banned. I didn't like that they went. So, but this card needed to go from a commander perspective and a CEDH perspective. And I'm going to be primarily talking about CEDH here, so I'm going to be viewing this from the lens of a lot of CEDH stuff. But from a CEDH side, yep, this card needed to go. So some strategies were made viable because of this card. But overall, this pushed out more strategies than it actually, allowed. They sped up the format. It made things a little too fast, and it made things a little too explosive. And so I think that the banning of this card is a net positive for CEDH. I don't think that this is a bad card to go. And I mean that from a CEDH perspective. I think this was a net positive. A lot of times when it came to Dockside Extortionists over the last number of years, like I said, a lot of strategies got pushed out. And what happened is that a lot of people would evaluate a new commander, a new strategy, a new archetype, and say, would this be viable? Would this work in this format? And a lot of times, because of Dockside Extortionists, that answer would be no, it would not. And because of that, it was pushing them out. This is very reminiscent of a different card that ended up getting banned a number of years ago. And that card is Flash. Flash had the same problem in our format. Basically, we were comparing everything to Flash and the Flash Hulk strategy. Basically, you had a new card, a new combo, a new deck, and you said, can this beat or at least compete with Flash? And if that answer was not at least maybe, you didn't even bother building it. You didn't even bother trying it. And Dockside Extortionist has been doing that for a number of years now, just pushing out otherwise, what could be considered a viable strategy in the CDH meta just couldn't because of Dockside's existence. So Dockside was so good that you really started to feel the lack of red in your decks if you weren't playing red. And so what that was doing is that was pushing more and more cards and more decks out of the format. There's a problem when you're like, I have this 3-color deck but it doesn't have red, so why don't I just put partners in there? And, and so I can make sure I have red because it's just so good. And I just really don't want to miss Dockside. And so that was, that's how I'm going to start to brew these decks. And that's how we get homogenized because of the overall power of this card. This card was so prominent that we actually saw an uptick in Phantasmal Image in decks that didn't have red, or even decks that did have red but also had blue. And you might be saying, that's not true. That's not what Phantasmal Image was before. Yes, it was. I ran the CDH staples list. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. And we saw the uptick. And so when you're actually, when it's always being cloned, copied, fetched, tutored, bounced, blinked over and over again, constantly, and it's a big part of your strategy, or it's a big part of what you're going to see, and you want that to be seen, there's a problem with the card. And as such, I definitely think it needed to be banned. Nadu, Winged Wisdom. So this one created very unfun play patterns, and I even saw this on the CEDH level. I know on the casual level, people didn't like it, but we even see this in CEDH. We saw this at CEDH tournaments. People just kind of sitting there, waiting for the turn to be over, waiting for them to see if they're going to win or not. We don't know if they are, but they have to play it out. So everyone's just sitting there and watching the Nadu player kind of play with themselves for 20 minutes to see if they can figure it out. This is very, very reminiscent of a certain other card that got banned in our format, Commander, but also CDH implications, and that's Paradox Engine. Paradox Engine had the same play patterns, and because of those play patterns, I think it makes sense that Nadu was banned as well. So I think it makes sense that Dockside was banned. I think it was good that it went. And I also think it makes sense for Nadu to be banned. I think this one was a lot more timely than the other ones. And I'll get to that maybe in here in a little bit. But I like that they kind of gave this one the axe pretty early on. So people didn't get so emotionally invested in having this deck, 2 months versus 5 years or something like that, or way different time frames. And so I think it was good that Nadu went. So the next one is Mana Crypt. Now, for those of you who don't know, Play with Power first created and maintained for a number of years the CEDH staples list. And what that is a list of kind of what our meta game looks like. What are the cards you expect to see at any given point in time? We would compile them early on from the CEDH deck list database. We did it for a number of years. It was handed off. We recently actually taken it over again. And I bring this up because Mana Crypt was on the CEDH staples list. It was number 1 on the CDH staples list. It had anywhere between a 99 and a 100% inclusion rate in every single deck we evaluated. Now, when it is so ubiquitous in any format, when a card is so ubiquitous, it deserves to be taken, it deserves to have a look taken at it, because there is a bad aspect to must run cards, must play cards. There's nothing wrong with good cards, but when you're talking about something so generically powerful that it absolutely needs to be in your deck, and there is no way that it shouldn't be, you should probably evaluate that. When you have something like this, you need to make sure that you're adherent. You need to make sure you're evaluating for the overall health of the format. And when I say health, I mean diversity of the format. So when you started a new commander deck or a CEDH deck, you didn't have 99 cards to fill. You had 98 cards to fill because Mana Crypt automatically took up a slot. And that was a problem, because basically what you said is that everyone's going to have this, and you're going to have it too if you want to be able to compete at this level. So intentionally not putting it in your deck created a problem where you were going to be slower than everyone else, which would a lot of times push you out. And so the idea of getting rid of this card was actually healthy overall for the format. It allows everyone to still be on the even playing field, because it was put in every single deck. This wasn't like a blue card or a red card that got nerfed, unlike Dockside Extortionist, unfortunately, but like every card, every deck is no longer having this card. And I think that that's good. So the last one is Jeweled Lotus. And this one I definitely feel like is the miss for me. So this card helped a lot of decks get the critical mass that they needed to help balance out the Dockside problem. This one doesn't really feel right. Jeweled Lotus being able to help power out different things with all how fast things was going with Dockside, with how fast things were going with Mana Crypt, and having Jeweled Lotus allowed people to compete in that space. So I think when you lose Mana Crypt and Dockside, Jeweled Lotus, still allowed other decks to still be able to compete while everything slowed down. They lost some of their consistency, but they also still had the ability to power up maybe higher value commanders. So Jeweled Lotus definitely feels like it doesn't belong on this list, and I don't think it should have been banned from a CDH perspective. I definitely can see the reasoning behind every single other one of them, and while I might not like it, I do kind of agree with how it will make the health of the format better overall, with the exception of Jeweled Lotus. I don't think that Jeweled Lotus is one of those things that was going to help us push things forward to a more healthier format. So now I want to talk about the kind of the meta considerations. What is the fallout of all this going to be? How are the decks going to look, and what is things going to look like? Obviously, I don't know, because the meta is shaken up right now. It's completely wide open, which is a good thing. I think that that's great. I think that, right now we're kind of going to make some educated guesses, but there's nothing to say that this is absolutely going to be the way it is. So first, I want to talk about the decks that were most affected. The ones that I feel that are probably going to have to really, really struggle to keep up, or have to really adapt their strategies to still compete. That's not to say that they can't or won't ever again, but I do think that they are going to have some trouble. And I hope and pray for the brewers and the pilots out there that do have these decks, that you can find a strategy that works for you. So the first one I think is probably going to get hit pretty hard is Korvold. Korvold, uses Dockside as its main strategy to accomplish its goals. The ability to sack a permanent, get the mana, and draw a card from it is really, really powerful. And so it's going to, I think it's really going to take that hit from not having Dockside there. Jeweled Lotus a little bit less, but it did actually help that too. But so I think Korvold's going to struggle. Now, the good news is that I actually played some games with the new ban list last night, which is great. And I heard some rumblings that Korvold is actually still doing pretty well, and I love to hear that. I think that's so great. And I hope that a lot of brewers who think that their decks are no longer viable kind of have that attitude in mind that these Korvold pilots have. Hey, it's not that they're dead because these 3 cards are gone. It's just different. So let's see how this all shakes out. Another one is Niv Mizzet Perun. The 6 mana value, 6 colored pips was a lot to ask. And if you had just axed Jeweled Lotus, that would have been a blow. Or if you just axed Dockside, that would have been a blow. But to axe both of them and in one swoop really hurt this deck. Once again, I hope Niv Mizzet pilots can find a way to, still make their deck viable. I think they're going to have a little bit of trouble, but once again, I don't know this yet. I do hope that it is going to be okay. But right now, as I see it, I think they're going to have a lot of trouble. And any other deck I'm kind of grouping in here that solely relied on Dockside as a win con. Like, hey, this is the only thing I want to go get because I want to do Dockside loops and win. So if Dockside was one of your win cons, I don't think that you're in this group of decks that I don't think are going to be viable or going to be pushed out. I think that if you only relied on it, so like some builds of Rocco, Cabaretti, Caterer, for example, would use Dockside as their kind of, this is my primary target to do some loops and shenanigans. Not every deck, not every Rocco deck. There are other builds out there, and Rocco will adapt because of its versatility. But I think those particular builds of Rocco might be no longer viable. And that's it. Notice how I didn't put 100 other decks in here that are no longer viable, and everybody, everyone has their hair on fire right now thinking that, oh my gosh, everything's dead, and, this, that, and the other. I've heard rumblings of Najeela is dead, and Sisay is dead, and all these other cards are dead. They're not. I mean, and I could say that with a certain degree of confidence. They're not dead. And, the reason why is because, when we talk about the meta, you're going to see why I don't think that these are actually dead. So let's talk about the next one, which are the ones that kind of got nerfed, the ones that aren't as good as they were, they're not as dominant as they once were. And what I'm going to basically call out is any sort of partner pairing that had Grixis or more colors that had Crom as their commander. And this would be like Tymna Crom, Armix Crom, Tevish Crom. Your decks got nerfed. And are they not viable? No, of course they're not. They're still viable. Everything's fine. But these decks got nerfed. And I know I can hear you typing in the comments right now, that's not true. Tymna Crom is a powerhouse, and casting Crom early with these explosions of cards were only like playing 4 out of 1, 2, 3, and 4 plans. It was the last on our list. I hear you. But you have to understand what you're saying when you have so many layered redundant strategies built into your deck. You have the ability to mulligan so well that at any given point in time, any of your opening hands can show anywhere between 1 and 4 strategies. You lose one of those strategies when you don't have the ability to power out a turn 1 Crom into a turn 2 Tymna and refill your hand. You've lost one of those strategies, so you have nerfed yourself. And as such, you're not going to be able to use Crom as consistently as a draw engine. Crom didn't used to be the powerhouse commander that it is today. It took a critical mass of these types of bursts of mana that allowed Crom to be viable. Back before things like Dockside and Jeweled Lotus, it was really Jeweled Lotus that put it over the edge. They didn't have the critical mass, and Crom, Tymna Crom specifically, was a fringe deck. Nobody played it. It was called Opus Thief. It was a wheels deck. So people didn't play Crom. You don't see Crom. You didn't see Crom back then as you see it as ubiquitous as you see it now. You see it everywhere. That's because of these critical mass of both Dockside. Obviously Mana Crypt was there, but it was Jeweled Lotus's printing that gave it the critical mass of bursts of mana through things like Mana Vault, Grim Monolith, Jeweled Lotus, Dark Ritual, other rituals. All those things actually allowed you to be able to reliably cast Crom. So losing that consistency is going to make Crom decks a little worse. They're not going to be bad decks. They're just going to be a little worse than they were before. And that is something I think is a good thing, because we're starting to see a little bit more of homogenization of all these Crom decks, as well as Grixis pairings. So I think that that's a good thing that they got nerfed. They're that's not that they're not viable. It's just that they're a little less powerful than they used to be through their consistency. So I'm not really putting anything else in this category either. I mean, I could go into details about maybe Tivit or something like that, but overall, these are the only ones I'm really see nerfed. And we're going to talk about why I feel that way when we get down into meta considerations. And then the last one is the ones who came out on top of this. Now, they didn't get better because no decks got better, contrary to what a lot of people believe. No decks got better, but some of these actually came out unscathed. for lack of a better word. I'm not going to say it. So they came out with the fewest scars, if you will, the fewest injuries. So obviously the big one in the room that a lot of people are kind of blowing up on the internet about is Rograk Silas Red. Now, Rogsai is not this new unbeatable deck. I just want to put that out right now. It is not a new unbeatable deck that everyone else is going to pair everything to. It is going to be one of the best, but it was already that. Rogsai, one of the things that was good about Rogsai was its speed. However, over the last year or so, it really refined its consistency through some of the tools that it had. So Born Upon a Wind being printed, not Polywog, but Valley Flood Caller got printed, allowed you to have so many more windows to be able to win. And what happened is that Rogsai lost some of its windows. So you can no longer reliably main phase and add Nas on turn 1 and 2 because you no longer have the critical mass of 0 drops or bursts of mana through things like Mana Crypt and Dockside to be able to kind of do something right after your Nas. So what you're going to do is all your windows just shrank. And it's the same thing with like Necro for 30 on the Incept. I'm going to Born Upon a Wind and then go off from there. Well, usually when you Necro for 30 and then you Born Upon a Wind, you're pretty much out of mana. And so what you're going to have to do now is you're going to have to try and find 0 drops to kind of keep going. And you lost one of them. And you also lost Dockside for the burst of mana. So these types of things are going to hurt the windows of the deck. The strategies and stuff like that are widely unaffected, but your windows have closed. So you're going to have to be a lot more strategic and surgical and thinking about when your windows are. I've kind of always said that Rogsai has a low floor and a high ceiling. It means a lot of people can pick it up and, win some games with that. And if you get really, really good at it, you can win tournaments with it. However, what happened was the floor just got raised. So you're going to try and add Nas on main phase because you're new to the deck. You're going to have no 0 drops. You're going to have to discard the hand size because you couldn't get there. So the next one is Kinnan. Kinnan didn't require Jeweled Lotus to begin with, so that wasn't a big hit for it. However, Kinnan it did lose Mana Crypt, so it's going to need those bursts of mana, or going to need something else for mana production in order to be able to activate Kinnan to do its flips. So it's going to have to rely a little bit more heavily on Dorks. And Bowmaster still exists. It was not banned from the format, so it's going to have a little bit of trouble with that. However, Kinnan definitely still did come out on top on this one as well, along with Rogsai. So I don't think Kinnan's going to be too effective from it. I think Kinnan's going to do well, but I don't think Kinnan, like I said, came out unscathed. It's going to have to work a little bit harder to get to its, activation of Kinnan itself. Some other ones that I think that could use a bump, will get a bump from these bans are any of the Sans Red decks that have low pips. I think that they're going to do well. The ones that didn't have Jeweled Lotus to begin with and don't really use red, a classic example of that would be Yuriko, the Tiger Shadow. I think that this one is going to see an improvement. Is it going to become the new, tier 1, tier 0 deck? I can't say that, of course, but I think that it is going to get a good boost because it's been very lacking for a long time, and it's very much fallen out of favor because it didn't have the speed necessary to facilitate this format. I can hear a lot of people making comments now. Well, what about this and what about that? And what makes you think that this isn't dead? And what makes you think that that's not dead? I can't believe you said that Sissy and Nagila weren't dead, because they absolutely are. I've already taken apart my deck. I've already sold off my collection and stuff. And I hate to hear that, because the reason that I feel this way is because of the meta considerations of these 3 cards being, banned. I know Nadu was in there too, but for the sake of this conversation, I'm really kind of only talking about these. Oh, by the way, Nadu was one of the ones that were the victims of it. Nadu was one of the ones that got hurt by it, or unviable now with Corvold and Niv. So I want to talk about the meta. So everything slowed down. Like I said earlier, when nobody has a Mana Crypt, nobody can take those turn 2 jumps now, or those 2 turn jumps, I should say, sorry. Everything slowed down by at least a turn. This is a good thing. This is a great thing to have. I'm actually very excited about that, because our format got so fast that the decks that were just a turn too slow were actually pushed out of the format, even with things like Mana Crypt. So When everything slows down by a turn or two, these decks that were just a turn or two too slow are now overlapping each other in the middle of the higher tier decks, and they now have some viability again. When everything slows down, it gives you the ability to start brewing in new spaces that weren't ever conceived or weren't ever basically viable before because you just weren't fast enough. If you notice over the last number of years, stacks as a strategy just completely gone. It just didn't exist anymore because it just couldn't compete. It just wasn't fast enough. You get one stacks piece down and it wasn't enough and somebody won on turn two. That was it. You were done. Or something else to that effect. Blood Moon as a strategy was completely obliterated. You couldn't use it at all because of Dockside. Oh, Blood Moon, that's too bad. I'll cast a Dockside and generate these treasures. You gave me the red anyway because you made all my lands mountains. So I completely negated Dockside, negated your Blood Moon effect, and I'm just going to win over top of you. So these types of things are now going to be viable again, or at least you can experiment with them again to see where things end up in this new meta. So stack strategies, like I said, couldn't perform well. They might have a place again, which I think is really good. Grixis, got hurt with Dockside. I think that's a good thing too. Early days before Dockside was printed and before these other, really good red cards were printed, Grixis wasn't the number one color pairing. It was green was definitely in that. It was Sultai was technically the number one. So 4-color and Sultai decks or Sans red decks were actually some of the most prominent ones. The Timnathrasios, the Tassigers of the world. They were the ones that were the most powerful. But then these printings of these very powerful blue and red cards just pushed Grixis into the forefront to a point where the other ones couldn't keep up anymore. And now we have a world without Dockside that allows us to maybe see if some of these other strategies might start emerging again. And I think that is super, super good. But like I said earlier, when you have something like the Flash problem where these things are just like maybe pushed out or something like that because they just can't compete with Flash, now we have the ability to say, hey, maybe we can try some of these decks that we just disregarded before. And I think that's super great. It's going to be a super exciting meta. I'd love to see where it all shakes out. I think it's going to be a really great thing going forward. So I want to touch quickly on the emotions and the fallout from all of this. It was a very tough week online, and I want to say first and foremost that I was very, very upset by these bans. When I first heard these bans, I was angry. I was saddened. I was hurt. I was angry. I was very upset. It felt very targeted towards CEDH players. Like it's like, okay, you want to slow down this format. And what you're trying to tell me is you think that we go too fast. You don't think that we're having fun the way you think we should have fun. And I take issue with that. I always have. So it felt very targeted. So I felt very attacked, for lack of a better word. And I really was upset about this whole thing. The rules committee, afterwards, they put out an FAQ, and they also were talking in their Discord about, hey, this we don't cater to CEDH bans or CEDH meta. We don't make these bans with them in mind, and so this didn't have you involved with it, even though unfortunately you felt some blowback from it. It definitely, I'm glad that they put that out because it let me know that it wasn't the case, even though it did feel that way. But I was upset. So, and I say that because I want you to know that you weren't alone in feeling this way. I was definitely angry. At one point I was considering leaving. I was like, I'm going to go play a different format. I can't believe that they've done this. They've completely they've messed with our format and everything's going to be different now. And I don't like it. And I'm angry. And then at one point, my anger and my emotions got so worked up, I was even considering breaking off and finding a new, and forming a new format. You know what? CDH needs to be its own thing. I think it's time. I think it's time that CDH become its own thing. And that's how angry I got. I got really angry about this because, whether or not we want to admit it, we have a very big emotional investment in our decks. And a lot of us don't realize that. And you don't realize that until some of these things that either made your deck viable or something like that are taken away from you, not handed away, taken away. They're ripped out from you. And you don't realize what an emotional investment you have into it until something like that happens. And a lot of us were unprepared for it. I myself was. Now, I never feel it should, devolve into things like harassment and things like that, which leads me to my next point. Your emotions, no matter what they were valid. If you were angry, if you were happy, if you were sad, if you were upset, anything like that, your emotions are valid. Okay. You're allowed to feel what you feel. They're your emotions. You can't always control your emotions. That's why they're emotions. What you can control is your actions. Our actions in this community over the past few days have been just reprehensible, deplorable. I was so ashamed of the community this week. I couldn't believe that we handled things the way that we did, and that was terrible. When we let our emotions control our actions, and since we can't always control our emotions, basically what we're saying is that we are not in control of ourselves. This isn't the way we should conduct ourselves, and I think we could all do well with a little bit of self-reflection from all this that has happened. So where do we go from here? This is what I kind of wanted to put a lot of the focus on in this video. So we have a couple of choices from my standpoint. We might have more, but these are the ones I kind of see as bubbled to the top. So you can go forward with a new ban list and explore this wide open space, for better or what you might consider worse, and go find out where things shake up. This has happened multiple times in the past. Flash, Paradox Engine, they got banned, and we had to figure out where the meta was. Some of those bans completely nuked entire decks off the planet. Arkham Dagson, Captain Sisay, not Sisay Weatherlight Captain. Those were just not viable. Because they only worked with Paradox Engine. So they just didn't exist anymore. So this kind of stuff has happened before, and we've had to figure out where things shake out from there. So this has happened, we've done this before in the past. And so I think that is one strategy. Rule 0, the cards back in to your local playgroups. Hey, it's always been an option. So says the RC and Commander as a committee. They have always said that Rule 0 is a thing. That's going to be a challenge for you because a lot of times CEDH is the rules as they're written. So that's going to be difficult to implement on a consistent level. But there's nothing that says that if you only play with your local play group and you don't play with anybody else, Rule 0 the cards back in and keep playing. Just ignore the ban list. It's fine. You can absolutely do that. That was always an option. You can quit. You can say, I'm selling out. I'm going to go find a different game. I'm going to go play something else. You can just pack it up and you can walk away. I ask that if you do that you sit on it for like a month or something. Though you can still sell your cards, just sit on it for a bit, because right now you're probably thinking a little bit more with your emotions than than actual logic, and you might end up regretting it down the road. And so I say that you should probably hold off. If you still want to do it after that, then by all means, go do it. It's absolutely an option. I think that it's sad that you leave. I wouldn't want you to leave, but if that is a decision you want to make, then go ahead and make it. And then finally, the one that I want to kind of talk the most detail about is the idea of saying, you know what, it's time to split off and form our own format. This is the biggest one that I've heard the rumblings online about, is, hey, it's time. Enough is enough. It's time we formed our own format. Okay. Now, this comes from a place of, well, we can't trust the RC anymore. They don't have our best interests at heart. We need to take care of ourselves. These are some of the things that are guiding some of these, desires to want to say, I want to split off and form our own format. Now, these feelings come from a place of exclusion and hurt. Once again, these feelings are valid. You felt like you lost your autonomy. You basically say, I didn't have any say in this. And it sounds like nobody else did either. And nobody wanted this. I feel like they don't have our best interests at heart. So you know what? I'm going to seize control of the situation, and we're going to form our own format that allows these things to happen. So I don't feel so out of control anymore. Feelings are valid, but it's probably coming from a feeling of exclusion and hurt. And I understand that. Splitting the format has real implications. Once again, please allow me to explain myself before you go running to the comments or making, or reacting. Please just allow me to explain myself, and then, maybe make some, put some rebuttals in or something like that. I'd love to hear them. Obviously, it goes without saying, but splitting fractures the entire player base in half. That seems like a no-brainer. But if you're thinking emotionally right now about the idea that enough is enough and we want to split off, then you might be saying, well, everyone's going to come with us, and so we'll have the same size community as we did before. And so we're all going to still play, except for we're going to play with our Docksides, Jewel Lotuses, and Mana Crypts, and everything's going to be great again. It's not. It's not going to be great again, because not everyone is going to follow you. You're going to create this new format, and you're going to have some difficulty getting a little bit of buy-in. You're going to get half the players on a good day at best. You're going to get half of the players, okay? You won't get the same buy-in that you did before with Commander, because Commander was seen as stable. The rules were already clearly defined. They weren't kind of up in the air like we do with a new format, because once you create a new format, you reevaluate everything, and that stuff will be in flux for a long time, as long as things like the ban list and stuff that you decide to do. It's supported by Wizards. Wizards of the Coast supports Commander as a format. So it's going to stay around, it's going to be healthy, and there's going to be a lot of uncertainty in the format you just create. So you're going to have a lot of trouble with that buy-in. A lot of Commander players are going to be like, I don't know if I want to try a new format. And you're saying it's fan-made, it's like, well, I don't know if I want to do that. And you're going to get a lot of that. CEDH isn't a format. It's not a format. I want to say that again. It is not a format. It is a metagame within a format. Okay. CEDH is EDH. That's why you see that said all the time, all over the internet. You see me say it. CEDH is EDH. It's just played at the highest level possible. It's a moniker to describe what would be a 5-minute rule zero conversation down to one sentence. We play with the rules as written. We play with all cards. You play as fast as possible. No salt, no feel bads. We all are here to win. Those types of things are what are encompassed into CEDH. If you split the format, CEDH is still going to exist. It's not going to go away. You're not going to take the entire chunk of CEDH players and say, you have to go play over here now, because they don't have to go play over there in your new format. They can continue to still play over here with the meta as it evolves. So that's not going to change. Okay. Also, as a side effect of that, since CEDH is EDH, you're going to immediately run into a name recognition / branding issue. We use CEDH as, a branding. I wish it was something else, now knowing what we know now. I wish we didn't call it competitive EDH, but CEDH has brand recognition behind it. And you can't hijack that as much as you might want to try to. You're going to run into issues when you try and say that. Hey, you want to come over here and play CEDH? Yeah, sure thing. Boom. And all of a sudden you see the people across from you playing with Jewel Lotuses and stuff like that. You're like, hey, wait a second. Those aren't legal. Oh, you didn't know this was a different version of CEDH. So that's not going to work. So what you're going to have to do is you're probably going to have to get a different moniker. You're going to have to get a different brand name, which is going to slow your adoption even more. Hey, you want to go play this X format over here? What is it? Well, it's CEDH with some of the old band cards. Be like, what else is different? And then you're going to have to go through all the explaining of that. Because if you're just going to make this with just the old band cards, that that's not where it's going to stop. That you're going to keep evolving it. So it's going to get farther and farther away from Commander with every iteration. And then it's going to even make buy-in even harder. And some of you might be saying, well, no, we're going to be democratic. We're not going to be authoritarian like the rules committee is. We're going to let people vote on it. Allowing the vocal minority to make decisions based upon subjective experience is going to be very bad for you. We see this in the Commander community all the time, in the casual side of things. They wanted that wolf ban, Voja or something like that. They were calling for Elish Norn to be banned. They were calling for Nyxbloom Ancient to be banned. I've been around long enough to know that they were calling for Cyclonic Rift and Deadeye Navigator to be banned at one point. When you're allowing a vocal minority to make these decisions for you, you are going to have a bad time. What you need are people that have the information and the tools to make these most informed decisions. Contrary to what a lot of people are thinking right now about the RC, they had the information to be able to make these decisions. And some, said, well, some of it was gut check and some of this and that and other. And I don't want to, once again, devolve into all of that. But they were making it for the health of the format. And if you're doing that based upon these subjective experiences that a vocal minority, not the largest player base involved, you're going to end up with issues, because you're going to end up with like cyclonic rifts and stuff like that being banned from the CEDH level. You're going to have the most random cards get banned. Every official WotC format uses a committee for a reason. That was not a coincidence. So to have it democratically have it democratically run is going to be a problem, like I said before. Having it democratically elected is a good idea. Like having a democratic, board or something like that would bring issues up and things like that. That's good. But to have democratic voting on the actual cards themselves, number one, you're not going to get everyone to go and vote. So you only get the people that you have in your small community, which is going to be your vocal minority. And so that's going to create problems. And all of a sudden, you're going to have the same thing that happened here. Hey, so-and-so's banned now. You're like, and a lot of people are going to be really upset because they're like, why? Okay. Oh, but you say, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do gut checks and stuff like that. We're going to make decisions based on data. That's how we're going to be different this time. Data-based decisions. So we're going to let data dictate what our bans should be. Okay. So I'm going to let you know that if you use data, which I think is a good thing, by the way, I don't think that that's a bad argument to make. You're going to come to the same conclusions that you've reached today. These cards are too powerful, they're meta warping, and you should probably ban them. So you are probably going to end up, based on your data, saying Dockside Extortionist is pushing out things from the format. Mana Crypt is making things too fast with too little downside. It was never balanced for any format ever. It used to be in a book back in 1995 or 6 or something like that. And Jeweled Lotus allows too consistent of fixing to basically push out other things. You're going to reach the same conclusion with your data. And you're going to end up back where you were before. So to say, well, we're going to make it different this time, but we're going to use data. Okay, but your data is going to lead you to that conclusion. And then you say, well, we're not going to ban them. Okay, so what you're then saying is that you're not going to be using data, and then you're not making that decision based on data, even though you're saying you're making that decision based on data. So you're going back to gut check, right? Which is what you hated about the RC to begin with, using gut check. That's not good, So why are you splitting if you're just going to do the exact same thing anyway? And then another argument is, but it's different this time. We have more people than ever. We're more upset than ever. We have more buy-in than ever. We're more structured. We're more organized. We're going to be able to make this happen. This is playing out exactly the way that it has in the past. This is not the first time that players have wanted to split the format. Okay, this is not the first time that people have said, I'm tired of this. We're going to split. They're going to make Discords. They're going to make documents. They're going to get on calls. They're going to make websites. They're going to do all of these different things. And it's going to play out exactly the same way. Now, people get upset about a ban. People get upset about, a decision like banned as a commander or something like that. They want to reverse the ban. So instead of working together with those who made the decision, maybe the CAG or the RC or something like that, they instead want autonomy in their format. They feel like they're not in control of it. And so they decide to go make their own format where they do have autonomy or they do have control over it. Your intentions are great. That's good to have that drive and that desire and that want to make change. That's a good thing. That's not bad. I think that those are very positive things, right? But I think that unfortunately in this particular aspect, if you're trying to split off and make your own format, that those intentions and those drives are misguided, unfortunately. And I know you're probably upset right now from me saying these things. And if I got to take it on the chin and take a little bit of your ire and your anger, I understand that. I do. But please understand that I am saying this for a reason. I'm not saying this to discourage you and make you feel sad or, make you feel hopeless or anything like that. I'm telling you that your motivations and your drive is a good thing. I'm saying don't take that drive to try and fracture and split and rip apart a format thinking it will grow. When you split a format in half, it won't grow. It'll usually, you've just torn it apart. Instead, take that drive and put it towards something that can institute a change. Put it towards something like creating a tournament addendum. Maybe a ban list for tournaments only or something like that gets adopted by TOs. Maybe put together something like a collective that can then talk to the RC to make CEDH based informed decisions that are either data driven or something like that. Taking those types of these concepts that you're using to want to split a format, which all have really good merits behind them, and putting them into focusing to make CEDH as it is better now is a much better use of your time. You're going to get more traction. You're going to get much better buy-in. You're going to get better results. And you're going to have something that can actually institute a real change other than, like I said, ripping a format entirely apart. If you want to create a different format, and allow me to be a bit facetious here to try and just drive the final point home. I wanted to let you know that people have been doing this type of stuff for years, like I said before, and some have actually made their own formats. They've gone through and they've pulled through and they've actually gone and made those formats. Have you ever heard of the following formats? Archon, Centurion, Conquest, Dual Commander, Leviathan, Oathbreaker, Pre-DH, or Tiny Leaders? These are all separate formats that use Commander as a baseline. So like 100 card singleton, commander damage, something in the command zone, whether it be a legendary creature or planeswalker. All of these formats already exist. All of these formats have done what you might be trying to do. Okay. How many of you are playing these formats? How many of you have even heard of every one of these formats? You might have heard of a few of them, but have you heard of all of them? Have you ever played them? You ever witnessed them in the wild? Okay. So this is what the path that you're leading down. When you decide that I want to rip apart the community, start my own format, you're going to just be on this list, a list of things that no one's ever heard of, because a lot of these different formats basically take Commander and tweak little things about it. We didn't like that it was 40 lives, so we put it 25 or 30. We didn't like you couldn't have planeswalkers. We want to do this. We wanted to be at a signature spell, so we did that. That's Oathbreaker. So on and so forth. They just add these little variants to the Commander format here and there. They tweak the little knobs left and right to kind of, formulate what's considered their own format. Some are 1v1, some are still 4-player. But at the end of the day, that's what all of these are. And if you really want to kind of take a look at where you are going to be closest to that, I implore you to take a look at Conquest. Conquest was made by CEDH players about 4 or 5 years ago. Okay. They said, what would Commander look like if it was geared towards CEDH? Okay. This can be considered a very good thing for you, depending on how you want to draw your conclusions. Number one, you can get a head start of what your format will look like today, 4 or 5 years from now, because you can look at where Conquest is right now. If you like the size of Conquest, if you like how Conquest plays, if you like all those things, you can look and see what your format's going to be 4 to 5 years from now by looking at Conquest. Another thing you can do is you can just say, I'm tired of this. I don't want to do this anymore. And just go play Conquest. It's well established. You won't have to do a ton of work to do it. It won't be a thankless job, which you'll find out is going to be very much the case. And you're going to see, and you could just go start playing right now with a lot of these rules that you are wanting to do to balance the format or balance things for CEDH. That is what Conquest has been doing for the last 4 to 5 years. One last thing that I want to kind of bring up based upon these. Well, 2 last things. First of all, if any of you play these formats, I'm not knocking on you. I'm not saying that you're doing anything wrong. I'm saying that, you are a fan-made format that doesn't have official support, and you have to do a grassroots campaign that takes years to really gain a decent amount of traction, or at least the traction that you maybe want to have when you were playing CEDH. Okay. So I'm not saying any of these formats are bad. I'm not saying that they were bad for making them or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But if you look at every single one of these formats, you will find something very interesting on their ban list. Every single one of them has Jeweled Lotus, Dockside Extortionist, and Mana Crypt on their ban list already. You are going to reach the same conclusion. Commander, as a whole format, was one of the last to get on board with getting rid of Mana Crypt. It was one of the last to do it. So they were the final holdout for some of these cards. All these other formats that regulate based on data, have maybe a democratic process, or they have or some sort of committee, they have all decided that these cards were too powerful and have already banned them. You're probably going to end up with the same conclusion. So with that being said, why not take your drive, take your direction, and go try and reinforce, create better tools to help the decision makers make better informed decisions about CEDH. If you still want to split off, by all means do so. You're going to have trouble, and I wish you the best in it. I'm not saying that you're wrong for doing it. You have the information now to make the most informed decision you can. And I hope that you will do something with this information. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close it up. I encourage you once again to make comments below. I will engage with any good faith arguments any of you have. I would love to hear some good rebuttals, because I'm one person. I have Playing with Power is me and a team, but we do not represent the CEDH community at large. We do not represent everybody out there. So please comment below. Let us know how you feel about different things. Let us know about, what you think could be different, or what some additional things that you might think might be the same. Or are you going to split off? Or are you going to do your own thing? And I'll engage with any good faith arguments anybody has in the comments. If you have any bad faith ones, I'm not gonna engage with any of them. So if you might just save yourself the keystrokes, because I'll either, that won't engage. But so, like I said, that wraps it up. I hope you all are well. Let's go play some awesome Magic in this new CEDH meta. All right, talk to you later. Bye.